At the moment we're standing in a Grenache Noir vineyard, the farm of Adi Baardnoort, Kalmoesfontein, on the granitic mountain Paardeberg in the middle of Swartland in South Africa. This is the oldest Grenache Noir vineyard. It was planted in 1952. What can we learn from this? How can we use this wisdom and this knowledge that's locked up in old vines to become more climate resilient? Very often some of our oldest vineyards, and we have 9 vineyards in South Africa that's older than 100 years, we know that they were planted at high density. We also know that the oldest vineyards were planted on old riverbeds. This might sound strange, but I firmly believe that old vines have some kind of a memory, because in dry seasons or dry spells like we've had from 2015 to 18 in South Africa, they automatically produce shorter canes, smaller leaves, smaller bunches and less bunches. But in a year where we had a lot of spring rain like this last season, they would produce bigger shoots, longer canes, bigger fruit, and for the year following as well. So they can remember the past but also anticipate the season that's coming. Old vines in South Africa don't necessarily have deeper roots like in other countries, but they have mat of fine roots, much more as compared to young vines. So they store their reserves in their wood and in their roots. Once the roots are well established, they add to the reserves of the old vineyards, but they also are more able to resist the climatic extremes. And if you mulch upon that root system, even the better. Professor Johan Burger has done this research at the University of Stellenbosch. The grapes and juice of old vines have a much better pH acidity ratio as compared to younger vines, and that's what we're looking for. That's the one thing that heat strips out of grapes, is the acidity. Climate change is a huge threat. The only way I think we can fight it is to go more green. We know, according to the IPCC report that was published a couple of weeks ago and the one that was published 4 years ago, that the scientists predict that we're going to be, in this part of the world, 3 degrees warmer by 2050. Some scientists even predict 6 degrees warmer. Now we're going to have floods and it's going to wash and erode. Old people used to hoe by hand. They used to fertilize with cow manure or some kind of manure, and they used to fertilize with self-made compost. So there were no pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, and therefore the soils were more alive. We can improve soil health that way, or with cover crops. Like you can see, Adi's just tilled here, and now the cover crop is coming up. And with mulching. Mulching is a fantastic way of improving soil health. Why is soil health so important? It retains moisture, so in the dry months that's coming, we will have more moisture in the soil. It controls weeds, so you don't have to use herbicides. It stops erosion, it causes porosity of the soil, it brings the general temperature of the soil down in a heat wave, and you can use it to fight compaction, because in South Africa our soils are very old and acidic in the winelands, and compaction is a huge problem, and the more compaction, of course, the more erosion. When some of our oldest vineyards were planted 100 years ago, there was a fantastic biosphere of different plants and different animals. On farms, you couldn't quickly hop into your car and go to the village and buy milk and cheese and fruit. You had to grow it on your farm. So there was an apricot orchard, there was maybe some apples, maybe some geese, ducks, definitely chickens, wheat, and there was lots of natural fynbos. I can assume that the wetlands weren't plowed at the time, because in wetlands you not only sanitize your water, you also provide habitat, housing and food for lots of different kinds of life. And if we can move away from monoculture to a more biodiverse ecosystem, and if we can create migratory roads or corridors for insects, birds and animals between, say, the mountain and the dam, because they also need water. How do we fight climate change? I think we should go greener and become more sustainable, and more self-sustained system. We can also go higher, we can go cooler, but that's new areas, new terroirs to be found. If we leave the flatlands, if we go higher, of course we have to rehabilitate where we're coming from. We can also plant in ways that capture the water that falls on the land. We know what nitrogen or chemical fertilizer does to our water and our dams and our rivers. Follow nature rather than dominate nature.
So while sustainability is very important in the vineyard, it's as important to look at sustainability in terms of the humanitarian part of the project. The people that's involved, people in the vineyards, the farm owners, to keep people in business. And also the business model between the grape owner and the brand owner. Because we need to have a sustainable business model that stretches right through the supply chain, from the vineyard right through the brand owner to the consumer. The Certified Heritage Vineyard seal was introduced a few years ago, and that gives the wine integrity and authenticity. And it's based on a traceability model due to an industry body called SARVIS here in South Africa. Our planting dates date back to 1900. So we've got records so far back, which is the first in the world, which makes our certification seal also unique and the only in the world. We are very proud of the project, and linked to the certification seal is the fact that we actually shaped a category. And there's definitely a buzz around this category that we shaped over the years. And it's very nice to see that other countries are catching on and amplifying the noise around old vine as a category. What's very important is the commercial aspect, because it all started with the dropping yield and the economic viability of these old blocks. And that's what we try to establish, is to put a value to these vineyards. So Dr. Jonathan Steyn at UCT GSB has been doing research on consumer perception, and they established within the first phase that the consumer is actually willing to pay a premium for old vine wines when it says old vine on the etiquette. So it's become clear to us that by moving closer to nature and through research, we can learn from these old vines why they survived, and we can then plant to grow old, which is a sustainable model for a vineyard to last not only 20 years but actually mature to almost 100 years and beyond. And through research, like for example the Chenin Blanc Association in South Africa and the University of Stellenbosch did research on old vine Chenin Blanc aromatics and comparing young vine Chenin with old vine Chenin wines, and the result was that there's different descriptors for old vine Chenin, which they actually eventually added to their aroma wheel.